them just stepping into their power, because I think absolutely every person has that power, and it's really stripped away from us in society and things like that. We don't realize the power that we have over our lives.
Oh my gosh, you're going to love this episode. You are going to be blown away by Minnie Courtney. I was blown away because she is such a youthful young person who has so much knowledge about personal mindset and manifesting and personal development and growth. She's leading her generation and people of all ages in terms of how to understand their own limiting beliefs. And in this fascinating interview, we talk about everything from worthiness and imposter syndrome to accepting and honoring even the difficult times as a part of your definition of happiness. We also talk about releasing difficult and uncomfortable relationships in your life and how relationships impact our ability to succeed in business. This is fascinating and an absolutely wonderful podcast to be listening to if you're looking to take your business to the next level. And how fascinating to be introduced to these concepts and led in these concepts by such an incredibly inspirational young woman. I know you'll find this interview hugely impactful. Please join me in welcoming Minnie Courtney. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a spectacular day because we are joined by the one and only Minnie Courtney. She is a manifestation and mindset coach. She's doing incredible things, and I cannot wait to introduce you to her. Please join me in welcoming Minnie Courtney. Hello, my love.
Hello, so happy to be here, and thank you for the lovely introduction.
Absolutely. Tell us everything about what you do, Minnie Courtney. What is a manifestation and mindset coach?
What a great question. Yes. So I work with, in my kind of area of manifestation coaching, I love to work with entrepreneurs, and especially female spiritual entrepreneurs, women who really want to make a difference in the world, want to improve their lives, the lives of people around them, and, you know, even further out than that. So I love helping these sorts of women to be able to achieve that through their mindset and manifestation, which has just been a huge part of my life. It's been my journey, so I'm now kind of passing that on to others as well. And I usually do this mostly through my one-on-one coaching, where I take clients through my triple R method.
Oh, you have to tell us what that is, please. What is your triple R method?
Opening up the suspense there.
I know, this is exciting.
Yeah, so my triple R method basically stands for refine, release, and receive. So that's basically the core framework that we work through together, and it's just a way to kind of structure the transformation to being really empowered, really in touch with yourself and with your power, and really living out your highest potential. So yeah, that's refine, release, and receive. And I think it's a lot of the time what I notice is a lot of people are stuck in that end goal of receiving, and they're like, I want this, I want that, but they haven't really gone through that work to really refine who they are. What do you want? Why do you want that? What do I actually need to release? What beliefs are not serving me anymore? What energetically is going on that needs to be released? All of these different things that build up throughout our lives, and we're not taught to deal with in any way, and need to be released before we can move on to that exciting receiving phase.
Perfect. And that sounds so critical in manifestation in all areas of your life. Those steps, I'm thinking right now that refine really speaks to clarity and becoming very clear on what you want. Is that what you mean by refining?
Absolutely, yeah. It's we go into refining lots of different things, and exactly that word really means clarity for me. So we go into clarity of our goals, which I think is something which we are quite familiar with. Yet, surprisingly, so many people come to me and they're like, "Yeah, I do want to manifest these things." And then I'm like, "Okay, specifically, do you know what that means for you?" And they're like, no, I just know I want to be rich. But we're not kind of sure, you know. So it is the goals as well, but I also like to go into getting really clear on who you are, what is your purpose, what is your bigger driving force behind them goals, what are your values that you are living by, and really just shining a light and putting a magnifying glass to all of these different aspects.
Do you find that when people start looking at getting very clear on what their goals are, sometimes they change their goals? Being more clear on what you're talking about, does that sometimes give them opportunity to pivot a little bit and become a little more creative with what they really want to manifest?
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, I've even had one client's coming to mind who even kind of changed her whole business idea really to a thing that was more fitting, really aligned with her big vision and her purpose. And the good thing is, I would like to think working with me, and hopefully everyone has someone that can do this for them as well, is that someone else can stretch your uh, ability to think big, your ability to think beyond what's realistic, because sometimes our goals are really largely a byproduct of what we think is possible rather than what we would actually want to achieve.
Yeah, it's just very limiting in that regard.
Definitely, and it's difficult sometimes to see past that when you can only see a certain physical reality around you. You've only known what you've achieved in the past, so it's difficult to switch into that new mindset where you can actually envision a future that is hugely different to what you've done before.
Absolutely. And do you think this relates also to personal life? I know you focus on business so clearly, but do you see an application for this in personal life as well?
Oh yes, absolutely, and it filters into every area of your life. I think that business really opens up a portal to kind of develop yourself, and it does force you to look at all aspects of your life. And I know that manifestation and mindset and all of the things that I work with and talk about absolutely come into every aspect of my life, whether that's relationships, my health, my business, of course, friendships, um, and also again when working with clients on their businesses, it's really oftentimes lots of different aspects of our life can come up throughout the sessions, because our business, especially when it's really a purpose-led business, as I do find a lot of people are doing, it impacts all of your life, and it's a big change. And also when we're manifesting anything, the way that we do one thing is the way we do everything, for one, and also it's really about your energy and where you are. So if you're having this really tough time in your relationship, for example, we can't just push that under the rug and be like, oh, let's forget about that, right? Let's go and manifest this successful business. We have to like look at the situation like holistically, I believe, and really work on each person and who your well-being and putting yourself first, because I do think that your energy and like where you are sitting within yourself is going to affect any business results anyway. So yeah, definitely.
Oh, it seems so simple, doesn't it? But yes, what a huge revelation in terms of running a business is that you have to take care of yourself and clean up your own mess, energetic mess, in order
Yeah.
to be an incredible leader and business owner.
Yeah, I think it's so funny when we hear these things outside. It's so easy to be like, well, of course, and we all know them as well. It's like eat healthy and do exercise. We all know that, but then there's just something in us that you
Mhm.
end up laying on the sofa with a box of chocolates, you know. I think definitely it's an ongoing journey throughout our entire lives to actually implement these simple philosophies and actually live them.
So I'd love to move on to that second R that you were talking about. The next one is release. So what do you mean by release? And what is an example of one of your clients doing so?
Yeah, I think release is really the biggest, heaviest, and most transformational of the steps. And it's something that a lot of people, I feel, get really stuck in that phase as well. It either goes two ways: either to just ignore it altogether because it just sounds so scary and big and they just don't want to look at it, or then they go the other way and they're like, okay, I need to heal myself, I need to heal my inner child, I need to recover everything, and then they're just stuck there waiting to be healed and good enough to move forward as well. So it's a really tricky one. And release, for me, we go into so many different things, because I think it means so many different things. So that's looking at relationships, looking at the inner child, looking at your subconscious mind, and looking at your self concept of who do you believe you are, and what beliefs are creating the identity that you're living in right now. So it's a really layered and deep one. And of course, because these things are also so different for each person, and depending on where their journey has been in life, I do really work differently with each person on this, depending on what they are most in need of.
And you touched on something that's so critical, and that is the beliefs that we have. And it's interesting because your beliefs can be so limiting in terms of what you think you're capable of. And also, as you mentioned, hold you stuck to prevent you from being able to release something. So, how do you work with people to help them change their beliefs about their own potential?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing definitely is shining a light on it and becoming aware of it, because I think most of the time we often don't understand what beliefs are really causing us to act the way we are and be in the situations that we're in. So I think doing that work to kind of figure out what those beliefs are. And I'm a big fan of journaling. So I like to utilize that tool a lot to kind of just allow that subconscious to come through and just come out onto the page. And oftentimes, when working with certain journal prompts and things like that, that flow of consciousness of just getting into a certain headspace, um, and then allowing yourself to write around a journal prompt, can bring out a lot of things from the subconscious that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that before, but that makes so much sense. And so I think that the biggest chunk of it again is allowing ourselves to find it, allowing it to have a light put to it, because I think we're so unaware. These things get pushed down so far into our subconscious, and we're always so focused as well on just our life, our just day-to-day life. You've got to go to work, do the shopping, speak
Mm.
to your partner, go out with your friends, that we don't often have time because we're just caught up in this day-to-day life. So even again, just taking the time to just sit down and set the intention, I would like to explore more about what beliefs are creating my life. Even that, and actually putting some time aside for it, is powerful in itself.
Wow, that's great. So, what do you find is the most common limiting belief of
Mhm.
entrepreneurs?
I think the most common limiting belief of entrepreneurs is I'm not good enough.
Mm.
It comes back to self belief and self doubt, I think, and that can show up in a lot of different like phrases for different people. But in the end, it's always like, can I do this?
Mm.
Am I going to be good enough? Who am I to be sharing this with the world? Who am I to think that I can create a successful business? Um, so it's that self doubt and imposter syndrome, which I think shows up in business. And again, I think business is just a really good reflection of what you're working through in your entire life. And so I think that that's something that's usually running people's lives before they come into business, but then starting a business just holds up that mirror, and it's like, okay, well, you're going to have to face it now if you
Mhm.
want to move forward in business. Because yeah, I think a lot of times that, am I really good enough, will have shown up in sometimes the people that we surround ourselves with, or the opportunities that we put ourselves forward for, and just the way that we live our lives in general.
So, how do you help people reframe that belief of lack of worthiness?
Well, I think going into your that work of refining your purpose, refining your value, and having like a clear vision of where you're going and why you're doing it helps, in a way of for taking action, because it's like, yes, I feel these things, yes, these doubts keep coming up, but I'm going to choose this vision anyway. I know what my purpose is, so I'm not going to allow myself to be held back by these things. So having a really good understanding of that, like why behind it, is one good thing. And also I use various different tools, such as during the releasing phase, especially, such as guided meditations,
Mm.
affirmations, movement to release
Ooh.
things within the body. And so, yeah, there's so many different tools out there. And I'd say if anyone was listening and is at like a beginner phase, again, just setting the intention, just like actually saying to yourself, I do not want to be held back by this belief anymore. You can just start by saying that, and that's going to create a powerful shift in itself. And then you can look into all of the amazing different techniques out there that there are.
That's such a powerful suggestion. I do not want to be held back by this belief anymore. Wow, that's great, because it immediately puts you back into a place of power.
Exactly. And I think that's what this whole journey is about for me. And what I love seeing in people is them just stepping into their power, because I think absolutely every person has that power, and it's really stripped away from us in society and things like that. We don't realize the power that we have over our lives.
Absolutely. So I'm so fascinated, Minnie Courtney. I keep wanting to call. Do you go by Minnie or Minnie Courtney?
Minnie's fine, yeah.
Minnie's great. Okay. Minnie, I'm so fascinated because you are so youthful. You have so much maturity about you that to me is just so fascinating for your youth. What is your journey? How did you come across these tenets? How did you find out the power behind these really impactful mindsets and for transforming other people's lives? How did you discover these great tactics?
That, first off, means a lot to me, and it's very, very nice to hear. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, I think I would say, I guess I just started really early, because from the age of around 11, I started researching into spirituality. And at that time, I was researching into all sorts of things, such as alternative religions like Wicca, and practices like that, that look at a lot of the alternative things in life. And I researched that very heavily around that time. Did hours and hours of study, reading books, and yeah. So I think you can probably imagine a 11-year-old going into secondary school with these sorts of things. I just didn't really fit in. And it was very strange. And I think that then actually led me to kind of, at around age 14, I kind of pushed those things to the side a little, even though they were, of course, still there within me and I still believed them. I kind of had a rebellious phase,
Mm.
and really lost that sense of my personal power, who I am, my self worth, and all of those things. Um, which is why I think the society that we live in is something that comes up a lot with my clients. Um, because I think we all know within ourselves all these things. We all intrinsically have that knowledge, we all have that power, but it is very difficult to be connected to that in our society, I believe. So anyway, yes, I went on this rebellion, and I was very depressed, I was very anxious, I was not happy with myself, and I did not know where I was going in life. And I was very, very lucky that my sister had a spiritual awakening when I was around 15 or 16. And that kind of rekindled my passion for those sorts of personal development, spirituality topics, and gave me a really good example of the other way to live, in your power. And I saw her kind of change careers, move to another country,
Mm.
and that I was so. I realize now that I was so lucky to have an example like that, because I speak with a lot of people, a lot of women who they're like, I really want to trust this stuff is possible, but I no one around me has done anything like that. I've not seen anything like it. So it seems a bit, like a dream that's unrealistic. So I was really lucky to have that, and it's great to be able to hopefully pass that on to others as well, and be like, if it's possible for me to do, it's possible for you as well.
So what was the switch? What happened that changed everything for you?
What was this? Do you know? I couldn't pinpoint it to one moment. I honestly believe that my sister having that change, that my sister's spiritual awakening was probably that switch for me. Um, it was to switch to reconnect back to where I had already been, and it's just like you can't predict them things in life, and that's all. I think all the most amazing things that happen, because of course, as we go throughout our journey, I think there's many of those switch point moments, isn't
Mm.
there, where things click, or where your path pivots and you feel aligned again. And I've noticed that those moments you can never plan out, because as much as I do goal setting, I love doing lifestyle design and like planning your routes and all this sort of thing, to kind of channel the energy in a certain route. You also have to allow yourself to be in that release, that surrender, and that trust,
Mm.
because you can't predict life.
Absolutely. And it's so fascinating when you talk about rediscovering that part of yourself that was your truth, that
Mm,
society had kind of put a block on, or you accepted distraction or
mm,
disguise or escape, or just society's judgment of you, and then had to forcibly hide who your true self really was. And I
mm,
love that concept of all of us have within us the truth, and we've just been ignoring it or putting it to the side for a while. That's
mm.
really very powerful.
I do believe so, because I think it's sometimes people speak about these things as if it's so separate from themselves,
Mm.
as if there's these people so much higher than them that know these things that they don't know. And yes, there's loads to learn about. You can research forever and ever and ever into the neuroscience of how our brain works with our mindset, and the energies of spiritual practices and all those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, there is always that an inner knowing within each of us, I really really believe, and we always have the power to reclaim that and to come back into our truth.
That's so great. And, it's fascinating to me that you had this revelation at such a young age. And I think it's so wonderful that you did, because some of us don't find that until we're in our 40s and 50s and 60s. So it's so brilliant that you found this at such an early age. And what advice do you have for people who are looking to reconnect with that intuition? That, because that's what you're speaking of. You're speaking to that inner voice, that intuition, and it's unique to each of us, which is why no one else can tell you what it is. You have to find it out for yourself. So, what practice or advice do you have for somebody who really wants to find out, rediscover that relationship with themselves?
Mhm. I think time alone
Mm.
is a really great one, of
Mm.
course. I would like to say the word meditation, but I am aware that that can be very intimidating for a lot of people who, again, it's one of those things that sounds a bit lofty, and it's like, oh, so I just need to sit there for hours and like not think anything. So I won't use the word meditation, but just taking more time to be with yourself, and also to honor yourself. So I'll do a little kind of life audit and think about, are you treating yourself like you would treat your child? Because it's like, you can imagine if you had a friend who you was constantly nasty to, you was constantly putting down, you was constantly not putting them first. Would they really feel like they could speak to you? No. Would they like be there to support you? No. So that's what you're doing to your inner self and your inner knowledge when you are caring about what other people think more than you care about what you really want. You're, talking down to yourself and all these sorts of things. You're damaging your relationship with your intuition by doing that. So I would take some time to really look at where you can improve your relationship with yourself, taking time with yourself, and that opens up the pathway for you to have the self-trust that intuition can come forward and be recognized.
What was the most powerful practice for you to get back in touch with yourself and your intuition?
It's an interesting question. I think that is definitely where it comes in. And I think actually I would narrow it down to relationships because, and I've noticed that this is quite a recurring theme, because it's a lot more of a difficult one. Whereas if we say, for example, writing down daily affirmations, although that is a very powerful one, and I would like to recommend that also, there's a certain ease to it. Whereas looking at your actual human relationships and how you actually interact with people in the world is a lot scarier to make a change in. So if there are people that are not aligning with the self-worth that you're stepping into, they don't make you feel good when you're around them. It's very difficult a lot of the time to actually step away from them relationships. And it's those big real life changes that I feel make the biggest shifts. So things like stepping away from relationships that actually do not serve you, stepping away from jobs that do not serve you. Again, very scary thing to do. I definitely am aware of that. But I think those make the biggest shifts. So I like to use, I think what's been useful for me to be able to facilitate that is to use things like affirmations, to kind of reprogram your mind, to get you in the right mindset, to get your energy in a place where you can have the trust in yourself to do those scary things, and they kind of ripple on from there. So yeah, I do daily affirmations, and I do them in the morning, and I sit with myself. Again, it's kind of a compound effect, I find, because it's really honoring yourself to take the time to do that. So take the time to sit and think about what I need to today to move me to that next step. What's holding me back today? Are there any fears coming up? And then I'll make some affirmations around that.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. What has been one of the biggest struggles for you in your personal growth and development?
I think I definitely think that these develop as you go on in your journey, and that's something to be very wary of at the start, because I think when you have a big limiting belief or a big issue, and it's the first one that you've recognized, when you overcome it, you sometimes feel like, oh, okay, I'm enlightened now.
I've arrived.
All done. And you will find out that, okay, put the ego down, because there's always something else to learn. So the first thing was definitely self-worth, which is what I was speaking about hugely before. And that was the huge hurdle to overcome, going through all of it. Where did those things come from? And doing the affirmations, making the life changes to be in a place where I was really valuing myself. That was the first huge thing. That was completely transformational in my life. And more recently, the things that have been coming up as I've stepped into business now, obviously as a teenager, I wasn't at that time. So moving into business now, the things that have been coming up more recently is fear of failure and fear of success, which it's, you know, it comes up a lot. Because it's difficult. And I did a lot of work on reframing failure, you know, because of course growth is the goal. Growth is one of my biggest core values. So really, I don't need to be scared about failure. I'm growing, and I did a lot of work to reprogram that. Again, I was like, yes, great, done. Then I had some success, and I was like, oh, now I don't want to lose my success. now this, instead of fearing failure, it's like fear of needing to hold on to this success. But again, all of these things kind of stem from trusting as well, and trusting in yourself. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of trust work to move through those fears.
Wow, fascinating. I love those. I love those because I think that's so relatable for so many people, Minnie. You know, reaching a certain level of success and then you kind of want to hold on to it. And it's almost like success can sometimes hold you back from growth, for even further growth.
Wow, I love that, because I feel like that's definitely really the stage that I'm really moving through now as I reach new levels. And you never know what's around the corner. You don't know what you don't know. And it's, you know, I never thought this would be an issue. This was never an issue that I was aware of. And then I had some success and it popped up. So yeah, I'm grateful for the growth. I'm grateful. It's a good problem to have for sure. And I'm setting the intention to move forward anyway, to not let that fear hold me back from progressing.
Awesome. So we've left out the last R, the
Yeah.
receive. Tell us about receive and why that's so powerful and a skill that we all need to develop.
Mm. So, receive is an exciting one. And the first thing I like to kind of look at with that is being in an energy to receive.
Mm.
So, when again, back to society, it's very much led by a masculine energy, which is all about giving and doing, and that directness. Whereas we don't often value, respect, and allow ourselves to move into the feminine energy, which is to receive, to have, and to flow. So we can see this a lot when people have such a difficult time to receive even a compliment a lot
Mm.
of the time. And so I really like to look at how open are you to receiving right now? How do you take compliments? How do you take gifts? How do you take favors? And how much do you trust that you're going to be received? How is your relationship with things that you do receive, like money, for example? So having a look at your mindset around those sorts of things and what receiving means to you, so that you can become open to it and allow the abundance, trusting that there's plenty for everyone. It's safe for you to receive. You're ready to receive. You're worthy of receiving, and all of those sorts of things. And then, of course, we do have some little manifestation methods that I love to use, have used in my life, and share with people, such as the good old vision board, which we all know and love, and things like daily writing as well, of scripting out what you want, what you're going to give in exchange, to keep that masculine and feminine balance, which is equals creation. So yes, that's kind of what receive looks like for me and means for me.
I like that. I like that so much. And it's interesting that the worthiness piece came up again. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that speaks to what you were saying earlier. Sometimes you think you've come to an understanding, oh, I'm worthy of this endeavor, I can take action. And then when it actually comes to fruition, you realize, wait a minute, am I still worthy? That might come up again for you.
Yeah, I think these sorts of concepts you're kind of always having to revisit, and it's really good to keep your mind open to that fact, and allow yourself to go there without any judgment, again, because we're always so hard on ourselves, and it's like, no, I should be over that, I shouldn't be thinking this. So just allowing the acceptance of anything that comes up, I find to be really beneficial and helpful, because it definitely does resurface. And I've had a lot of times what comes up is, oh my God, these things are actually coming to me now. Oh, am I ready? And then it kind of kickstarts those fears again, or those doubts again, when you actually start to see a totally new life happening, totally new things that were not part of your reality before. It's quite scary.
How much does that relationship building help or hurt in terms of this new manifestation? So when you're beginning to realize things that you've put into place, you're realizing the success, you're beginning to notice it. How much does your community and the people who you spend most of your time with help or hurt in that regard?
I think it's absolutely huge.
Mm.
And I do think that it's a great question, because I think it's very downplayed within, especially the like mindset communities and spiritual communities. There's a very much a notion of individualism and like being a strong, confident woman, like who doesn't need anyone, kind of thing. And actually, if we look at things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our need for human connection is hugely important, and actually more fundamentally important to us than spiritual actualization and achieving these outside goals. So I think that really fosters a really unhealthy mindset, leads you to never feeling fulfilled and things like that. And so I'm very big on allowing your relationships to be a benefit to your life, a benefit to your business, a benefit to your goals, not something that should be holding you back. And on that note, it is still one of the most difficult areas. And especially when you start to go through those shifts, like you said, and you start to upgrade to a different place. For one, the people, if you that you were energetically aligned to before, if you've kind of gone to a different vibration, a different energy, a different lifestyle, there's like a disconnect there, and a lack of resonance that starts to happen, which is very uncomfortable. So that's kind of something you have to choose to move through, and allow that releasing to come into play. But also being aware that connection is very healthy. So what can I like, which connections are valuable to me? How can I nurture them connections alongside the work that I'm doing for myself?
Absolutely. So there is that release of the old negative and then a reception of some new relationships or reception of new ideas of relationships.
I think definitely both. I think most of the time there will definitely be new relationships coming in, because you're in a new identity, you're in a new energy, and that you're now kind of at a place where you are going to be drawing in those people who are also at that place, where you weren't before. So I think there's definitely new relationships that usually come in that time, and also, like you said, new transformations of old relationships, like new versions of those old relationships. And again, that's what can be difficult, because we are very like, we have our expectations, don't we? We have our, this is black and white, that's what this person is like. And that's why it's so difficult for other people as they see us changing, because they have an expectation of who we are. And it's very difficult for people that we've known for a longer amount of time to see us in the present and see us as the fresh version that we are today. But if you can allow yourself to just keep letting go of the expectation of who they were yesterday and who you think they are, and really see each person on the present moment, then you can see, okay, is who I am now and is who they are connected in this present moment, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And as you were talking, I was even imagining that as the relationship that you have with yourself, because sometimes we don't recognize ourselves as we're beginning to change and grow. And that, I think, can also be, I don't know if you agree with me, but that can also be a limitation of growth. You start to see someone different. You start to judge that new person and you hold yourself back a little bit, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that self concept of who we see ourselves as also then is creating the beliefs that we have, which, you know, and the
Correct.
actions that we take. We don't see ourselves as a person who does these things that these hugely successful people do, so we don't do them. And we don't, like, we've never seen ourselves as a person who makes a certain level of income, so we're not energetically aligned to that income. And so yeah, definitely it's so much learning and growth
Yeah.
and transformation that happens. It's so exciting, and it's so changeable, and it's a very unstable time. You know, it's not always the most joyful process. You know, I think there's a lot of ups and downs and growths, and like death of self, death of old self, death of
Mm,
relationships, which I think is good to keep in mind, because it's, you know, sometimes we have that story, like Disney kind of vision of what it will look like in this
mm,
perfect life, and then we get again a bit uncertain when things aren't actually always feeling great.
mm.
But it's kind of just like trust the process.
Yeah. And give yourself permission to have those growing pains along the way.
Yeah, there's no sort of growth that is completely comfortable. I just always kind of relate that back to having a baby. Not that I've had one myself, but I know it's a very uncomfortable process,
Yeah.
that growth and birthing like new life. And it's the same when you're birthing a new identity and a new business, a new idea into the world. There's going to be a lot of discomfort along that journey.
It's so funny you're talking about this, Minnie. I was just speaking to a client about this morning, about this concept of as you're about to step up into a new version of yourself, it being uncomfortable, the idea of like a snake and a snake's skin. And when they get too big for their own skin, it actually hurts. They're trapped in this old shell that represented who they were before, you know,
Yeah.
and then suddenly as they're growing into something bigger, you need to release and shed that shell, but it's not comfortable. It's a painful process, but it's
Mm.
always happening right before this big transformation, this big realization of a new you. So
Yeah.
having that faith in the process, like you said, is so important.
Yeah, definitely. That moment you want to step back, to
Mhm.
run back into what you know, into what's comfortable. But that's the breakthrough point where you've got to keep pushing forward. Yeah, I love that.
How do you keep your clients engaged in that moment where you can see, because I could just tell from you must have great intuition in terms of your clients' growth as well. How do you support them when you see this really painful point where you know it's the launching pad for something beautiful?
Yeah, that's a great point. What I like to do is usually recommend some sort of trust exercises, or and go through some sort of trust exercises with them. I'm a really big fan of breathing,
Mm,
and so I think we need to feel safe, you know, in those moments. Like that's where the fear is coming from, right? It's because we're always trying to stay safe, we're always trying to stay alive, and you know, it's not really relevant to us anymore in our society, but we're still being held back by that primitive brain that wants to keep us safe. So I just like to recommend some breathing where you hold that exhale nice and long,
mm,
and just sit with yourself in that breath, focus on the present moment, come into your body knowing that you feel safe. And that breathing really helps to calm the nervous system and, you know, feel safe within your body. So that is not going to be the overriding force, because we want to step into our higher self, because our higher self will choose to move through it. But it's when we get caught up in our lower brain, I think, that like survival mode of like, no, I can't do this. So it's just stepping back, take them deep breaths whenever you need to, realize that you're safe, allow yourself to be safe even though it feels uncertain.
perfect. Well, I love that practice because it's something that we can all take with us every day in those moments where you feel the anxiety bubbling up or the nervousness or defensiveness. Just
Yeah.
taking that deep breath and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system and giving yourself an
Yes.
opportunity to see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think that those are, for me, the most effective sort of exercises
Yeah.
in those moments. Things that like bypass the thought process and you are coming into your body. So again, like you said, breathing exercises, anything that's going to activate that parasympathetic nervous system, exercise, those sorts of things, dance, things where you're really coming into your body instead of the brain.
So great. So great. Oh, Minnie, you're just such a wealth of knowledge at such a young age. I don't mean to keep harping on the age here, but it's so refreshing to just know that, you know, age really is just a number, and it really is just an understanding and coming back into a recognizing of what's important to you. And that, you know, I think sometimes we hold ourselves back because of our age. Either we feel too young or too old to be able to do something. And it's such a great refresher to just remind ourselves that age doesn't matter in terms of refinding yourself.
Yeah. You know, as you're saying that, it kind of actually sparked a memory for me that I must have pushed aside. But I actually, just before I started my coaching business, I kind of said, like, I know this is what I want to do. I know this is what I'd be perfect for. This would be amazing. I think I could do that in about 5 years' time when, like, people will take me more seriously, kind of thing. And me being me, I like to just collapse timelines. So about 2 months later, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And, you know, I kind of just moved through that limiting belief and actually became to see it as a limiting belief rather than a truth, and did it anyway. But I think it's a good reminder as well, because I guess there may be, I think somebody said it to me before, I wish I was as self-aware when I was your age. And I think we always see it that way. It's like, for me, it's every person that you look at and you think, oh, I wish I had this that they had. I
Hmm.
wish I had that. I wish I had the business they had. They're probably wishing for other things as well. They're wishing for something that, an aspect of your life, and that comes up for me a lot, because I'm thinking, oh, like, I wish I did this when I was younger. Oh, there's millionaires that are 19. Like, oh, am I getting older now? Like, do I have enough time? And those things are just absolutely still coming up for me. So I think it just goes to show that, like, no matter what circumstances you're in, those 19-year-old millionaires are probably thinking the same thing. And it's really like happiness and inner peace and acceptance of yourself comes from really inside yourself. I think not any external situations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, since you mentioned the word happiness, what does happiness mean to you? What is your definition of happiness?
Ooh, my definition of happiness is acceptance, I think.
Mm.
I think when you're in a state of acceptance, that is inner peace, which is happiness to me. And highly important, I think, with manifesting as well, because when we think of manifesting, we think of our goals, we think of what we want for the future. So I think it's a constant balancing act. I always say life is just one big balancing act. I think it's a constant balancing act of looking at that beautiful future that you're creating, and also being in total acceptance and gratitude of where you are in this present moment. And I think that that balance is happiness for me.
Oh, absolutely. So good. So good. And what's fascinating is acceptance doesn't imply that it has to always be joyful or over the top,
Mm,
exciting and pleasurable, but accepting even the difficult times, accepting the challenges.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because to me, I definitely see happiness as that acceptance, which is, like you said, very separate from the exciting moments and the
Yeah.
joyful and the flying off to holiday or celebrating something big. I think happiness is that acceptance and that inner peace that we can bring into every moment, which has to be a very intentional choice, like you said, because there's so many ups and downs of life, there's so many struggles, there's always something
Mm,
to continue on to at
mm.
absolutely every level. So I think we have to really intentionally make that choice to choose happiness and to choose acceptance with where we are right now.
Very cool. Very cool. So, what do you think is your superpower?
Ooh. I think my superpower is the ability to hold both truths. That just kind of intuitively came out of me without any thought. But I think my superpower is the ability to see both sides of the coin and hold both truths of everything in life. I used to have a thing where my friend who had a very kind of black and white mindset would always try to challenge me to find things that I believed were totally true and totally false. And there wasn't anything, because I can always see a different side, a different perspective, a different opportunity, a way that that could sometimes be true or someone could perceive it as true. And I think that that is so useful in life, because we have a very like black and white mindset, I think, like naturally in our brains, and that causes us a lot of suffering, I think, and a lot of this is wrong or this is right, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And also it's very difficult to trust in your path when you can only see it in this way, and like you don't have the business, you don't have the money, you don't have the partner you want. So like having that expansiveness of mind to see past what's right there, to see past the obvious, um, is what I would probably say for me, and I would love to challenge everyone to try to explore even further.
It's a fascinating concept. Can you give us an example of when you used that in your own life and how it helped you in that moment?
Yes, it helps me in basically every social interaction, because
Ah,
I think that is communication is just such a fundamental thing for me. That's also one of my core values. And I think we have such a miscommunication because we're seeing our viewpoint, and it's very difficult to see a viewpoint of someone who has a different background than you, who has a different life than you. So I'm constantly using this in my, so for example, if you have a disagreement with someone, I'm looking, okay, where could I be wrong in this?
hmm.
Where can I find the opposite of what I believe to be true? Why could they think that that is true, and why could that not be true? And just constantly looking at the other side, and that really changed my interactions with people.
Wow, I love that. That's a really powerful one and definitely something we all could aspire to. I love that. All right. Well, before I ask you our final question, this has, by the way, been fascinating. Absolutely such a great conversation. Thank you, Minnie.
Thank
I'm so
you.
grateful to you.
I
Before
really enjoyed it.
this is really fabulous. I can't even believe time has flown so quickly. Before I ask you my final question, how can my audience find you? We'll leave all the contact information in the show notes, but if somebody's listening to this as they're driving, how can they look you up? Where can we find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. That's Minnie at Minnie Courtney, Minnie Courtney, and also on TikTok. I have a lot of fun over on TikTok, and that's Manifest with Minnie.
Wonderful. We'll definitely look you up and I highly recommend it. It's a fabulous page. Your TikTok page is absolutely killer. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
So, my final question to you, Minnie, is if all of your TikTok were to disappear, if I know you just, your eyes got so big there, and, all of, I know all this hard work that you've done, and you knew that you could leave us with one beautiful message that we could use to color our lives for better manifestation of our dreams, what would that message be?
You are exactly where you need to be right now. Trust your path. I think that's what my message would be.
Wow. That is beautiful and so loaded with so much of what you were just talking about in this past hour in terms of connecting with yourself, giving yourself permission and the worthiness, the confidence.
Yeah, I think it really goes into all of the steps, the refine, the release, and receive all come down to that, because it's trusting your vision for the future, trusting where you are now, and trusting that it's safe to let go of what you currently know.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank
Minnie, you
you
are
for
doing
having
amazing,
me.
incredible things in this world. Keep going, sister. I cannot wait to see you just grow and continue to grow in front of us. It's just so beautiful to see.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate the support, and I'm so happy and honored to be here on your beautiful platform.
Well, thank you so much. And wishing you the best of luck. Please stay in touch. We'd love to hear more from you as time goes by.
Yeah, for sure. Brilliant.
Thank you. Well, and thank you to all of you for listening today. This has been an excellent, excellent interview. I hope you've gained as much new insight and knowledge as I have. And as always, today is going to be a great day. Bye bye.